Personally, I've been very happy about recordings because it really takes away the whole pressure of feeling like, oh, I have to get there, right on the minute. And also, if you have other things going on, you can always go back and check. And I think it's just great.
So I'd say, Tessa, go ahead and start whenever you'd like. It seems like people will continue to join probably for the next couple of minutes. And in the meantime, I'd invite everyone to say hello in the chat and introduce themselves. And we already have a nice chat conversation going thanks to Jocelyn. Hi, Jocelyn. Also, I haven't seen you in quite a while, but it's great to see you here. And with that, I'll give it over to you, Tessa.
Okay, thanks, Sam. Well, I'm Tessa Joles. I'm president of the Center for Media Literacy, and we've been just thrilled to partner with the Media Education Lab on being able to offer this webinar series because it's such an important subject to every one of us. I know we don't often think of it, but really, when it comes down to it, citizens are the first line of defense. And as media literacy researchers and practitioners and educators, we know how much the media really affects our decision-making as citizens. And so we need to be very cognizant of that. We've been involved in taking kind of a fresh look at an aspect of media literacy that many people don't think about, which is media literacy as a national or just general defense strategy. And I'm really pleased this evening to be able to introduce my close colleague, Monika Hanley. Monika and I first met when she was in Riga, Latvia, working for the NATO Strategic Center of Excellence for Strategic Communication. And Monika won a Fulbright NATO Security Studies Award to be there in Riga. And I know I've heard some subsequent reports from her NATO colleagues about her contribution there and how valued that contribution was. So we have someone with us in Monika who actually serves in the military, and she can give us a really firsthand view of media literacy as a national defense strategy. And I think it's especially pertinent coming from Monika, who also is a media literacy practitioner and expert and researcher. So Monika, please take it from here.
All right, thank you very much, Tessa. Thank you to everyone at the Media Education Lab for hosting this series as well. It's an honor to be here and to talk about a subject that, as Tessa said, it's incredibly important, but not really discussed very often. And as we know, and sometimes forget, members of the military are also citizens. It's, and private citizens who have their own lives and who make their own decisions, and their families as well. So it's a very important thing that unfortunately now is only kind of gaining interest in the military, both at a high level and the lower levels. But I should also caveat that the views expressed in this presentation are my own. I'm not here to make official military statements or endorsements. So we'll have some anecdotal stories perhaps, as well as everything I could find that talks about media literacy in the military, and what's being done to promote media literacy and why. So with that, if I can share my screen, I believe I can. Let's see if we can all see that, I hope. So the basic topic: how does the US military employ media literacy in national security? Pretty broad topic, but oops. So my background, just a little bit about myself. Before I joined the military, I was also a journalist, and I also still write at times. I've been in the US Navy since 2012. And like Tessa said, I had a Fulbright to the NATO Strategic Communications Center of Excellence in Riga, Latvia. The Baltic states have several centers of excellence. Some of you may have heard of the Cyber Center of Excellence in Estonia, which was a reaction to the Bronze Soldier riots, I believe in 2008. And so they had the first NATO Center of Excellence there, followed by, I want to say, the Strategic Communications Center in 2014, which was a response to events in Ukraine and Russia heating up a bit. And then after my Fulbright, I was able to work with Tessa at the Center for Media Literacy, where we've been working ever since together. So a brief overview of what we'll talk about today: why media literacy is important in a military context, necessary domestically as well as overseas, especially overseas. What's being done to foster media literacy in the military. And like I said, this is very new, so some of this information will be only a couple months old. And then more of a discussion point: what more can be done? Of course, more can be done always in every sector of society for media literacy, but I'd love to hear some lively discussion on, in your view, from your experience, either as a US person or not, what more could be done in your own countries, or what you think could be done in the US military for media literacy. So just to start out with some risks to military personnel, a lot of digital literacy has come down the ranks in recent years when folks realized that part of operational security and keeping people safe during operations or in general came in the form of digital literacy. So digital literacy has been around for quite a while, and it's sort of being blended with media literacy now, because folks realize that service members use a lot of social media and have been exploited for their data, for location information, targeted messaging, as well as exercise interference. And there is a great report from the Strategic Communications Center on an exercise that they did that involved actually convincing members of the military, both US and other NATO troops, to actually leave their post in the middle of their duties to meet strangers online. And that was not an expected result. They didn't anticipate that that would happen, but they were very cheaply, they were able to do it very cheaply and easily. And that reached, I want to say, the Senate. And so a lot of things were passed very quickly to avoid that kind of embarrassing mistake of service members. So hopefully that won't happen again, but you never know. So social media is a big part of national security and defense for military personnel. Another risk is other service members. The US military is incredibly blessed to have a huge variety and diversity within its ranks. And I don't want to say we have members from every country in the world, but it's pretty close. Any small country you can imagine, there is likely at least one or two serving in the military in the US, which is very interesting, but of course comes with differing viewpoints, different media sources and opinions. People love to talk, people share false information, especially if it's very interesting. And this can interfere with their orders, as well as insider threats. That's one thing that I look at a lot is, insider threats is anyone, not necessarily spying for another country, but collecting information for malicious purposes on other service members. And then you have military families. And this is something that people have talked about for years as well, that we need to educate military spouses and families, especially with digital and media literacy, because they are a huge target for data exploitation, financial exploitation, as well as bigger picture. So every piece of information out there on any military member, US or otherwise, is just a tiny piece of a puzzle. But when you collect enough of those puzzle pieces, you get a great picture of what's going on, either financial information, troop movement, activities, and so on. So a lot of risks to military personnel. And then this is also from, I'll zoom in on this in a minute, but malicious exploitation of data. And this is in the context of military members. And this was also put out by NATO. So we have just a closer look, general manipulation of any kind, finance, insurance, health information is also big. I'm sure you can imagine why adversaries would want health information on non-military members, but also just general sharing of information in comments. That was something that was seen recently where military members can be very vocal about their opinions. And when you have comment sections on news stories, it's a great way to gauge military opinion at times, which can be used by adversaries. So you have, again, that sort of blend of media literacy and data literacy. And oftentimes comment sections on media websites are linked to social media, are linked to Facebook. And so you get a wealth of information just from scrolling through news comments, which is interesting. Doxing, I'm sure some of you have heard of doxing, basically revealing and releasing information about individuals who would prefer not to be, who would prefer not to have that information released publicly. This could be used as a threat, as blackmail as well. And this is also harmful for the confidentiality of service members, as well as the greater picture of operations. Impersonation, this is also something that has picked up pace in recent years, impersonating military members on social media, either to get money, to get information, to, as I mentioned earlier, to get people to leave their posts for whatever reason, to gain access to military accounts, security information, classified information, all kinds of things. And then sensitive information, especially via social media, via mobile devices, via the internet, via unsecured Wi-Fi. And what's interesting is that during the Russia-Ukraine conflict, that was actually how we were able to confirm that Russian soldiers, even unmarked uniforms, we were able to tell that they were in Ukraine because they were posting to social media, and then that got picked up by news and then spread further. So that was interesting. But first discussion question I'd like you to talk about is what other aspects of military operations could be impacted by disinformation or lack of media literacy skills? And I would love to hear your opinions on that. So I've given you some. January 6th is also a good example. Regardless of what side of the political spectrum you're on, it's very difficult to deny that media literacy plays a part in that, in terms of information consumption that led to people making decisions that they did, especially dozens of active and former military members. So that's very, very close to home, national security, if you will. But I'd love to hear more impressions and more talk about that. So if we could get into breakout rooms, Sam.
All right, I'm going to open rooms of 3 to 4 people.
Should I stop sharing? I'll pause.
Oh, no, go ahead. I think you can go ahead and continue sharing for now. Okay, so I've opened the rooms, and go ahead and join at your convenience, and then we'll come back together in a few minutes. I'll give you maybe 2-minute warning or so before I close the rooms.
Okay, I'm gonna switch devices, so hopefully it will be okay. Is there, I join immediately, right? When should be fine, I think. Anyway.
Yeah, I think it should be okay.
Okay. Just as a reminder, in 2 weeks or whenever is the next one, that's when you have your flight, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Someone ended up in a room by themselves. That's sad. I have to put them in another room.
You can choose. There's an option to choose.
Yeah, I put them in a different room.
Okay.
Yes, that is a good reminder to forward you the flight
Yes.
confirmation. Sorry.
I don't know, Rita, Claire, Gabriel, if you need any help to put you in room, just let us know.
If you're just joining us, Anna Maria and Jordan, we're discussing. Oh, hello.
Sorry, yes, my apologies. I was having some privacy issue there. I think I figured it out.
Oh, no problem at all. I'm going to go ahead and put you into a discussion room, and
Thank
I'm
you.
going to repost the discussion.
I saw the discussion question there, but
Okay.
I just,
Great.
whatever issue, my microphone wasn't working there.
Ah, gotcha. Okay.
Okay. I'm off, but I'm listening.
Hello, Gleidson. And if you can hear me, we're talking in breakout rooms, and I'm going to go ahead and put you into a room now. So feel free to join. Hi, Jenny. Did you get kicked out?
Hi, I had somebody in my breakout room, but there was no communication.
Oh, no.
And I wasn't sure if we were gonna have a facilitator or if there was gonna be a larger room. So I just said, let me go back to the big room and see what's going on.
Oh, I see. I'm sorry. No, should I put you in a different room if the person that you were with is not?
How much longer will we be in breakout rooms? I can just wait.
Probably about 5 minutes or so.
I'll just stand by, not to worry. That way I'm not interrupting the flow of another breakout room.
Okay, sorry
just-
about that.
No, not to worry. Thank you very much though. Thanks.
Okay. Hi, Jennifer. Thanks for joining. I don't know if you were here before, but we're just going to be wrapping up breakout discussions in just a couple minutes.
All right, and we're back. Is everyone back? Yes. Okay, that was a great discussion. Incredibly interesting. I think, do we have time to take a couple comments? Okay, excellent. Well, just briefly, my group, we had a good discussion from Michael, who was a teacher at Department of Defense schools in Italy in the 90s, which again, pre-internet, but incredibly interesting in touching on that family aspect of any information that families have could be used against the military, which is a scary thing to think about, and as well as media literacy and the law, which is something. So I just finished a Master of Laws and Human Rights, and so I was looking at media literacy as kind of a human rights approach, and you have that a lot in the military with people don't want to think that their information is being restricted in any way. So that was one of the other points I was going to make, was in the beginning, when talking about media literacy, some people said, let's just post a safe list of good sources for people to get their information from. And you go, that's the opposite of media literacy. We can't do that. So we have to actually teach people how to make their own decisions based on information that they consume. And we're slowly getting there. But I'd love to hear from any other groups that would like to share theirs. I don't know if there's first come, first serve, if someone wants to jump in.
Well, okay. I was in a group with Peter and Nino, and a few points that we discussed. And from my group, if I'm if I'm misinterpreting your thoughts, feel free to jump in and correct me here. But a few things that came up for us was especially now coming out of this pandemic, really the importance of health misinformation in terms of the health of our own servicemen and women and their families. Of course, them kind of it being even more important, being that they're all in close quarters all together, all the time, and medical misinformation can really be really deadly. Outside of the pandemic, talking about how their health resources are very limited. Basically, you have, the hospital on base for the service people as well as their families, and that affects, decisions in giving birth and all kinds of other health aspects. And misinformation can, about different health topics and medical topics can really make a big difference in terms of their own health of the personnel. Something that also came up that Peter brought up was, how easy it is for things to escalate, military escalation, to talking about just these really massive weapons that, can be deployed, nuclear and otherwise. How, who's the one sitting there with the power to make the decisions, and what are they listening to make those decisions. Talking about who's the filter, like who's the one at the top for the filter of internal organizational knowledge, so to speak. And Nino brought up how polarizing things, you had mentioned, Monica, how the military really is like a little America, in that it's, you really have everyone represented there. And I'm sure along with that, you have minorities who are, othered, and, these kind of polarizing beliefs can also really affect people's health and well-being and safety, and their whole experience of serving.
No, that's such a great issue, health information, especially now. The military has made it an end of the year deadline for all service members to get vaccinated. And, just like you said, the military is a slice of America, and all viewpoints are represented. So you're going to have people who are very pro, very anti, and especially in the military, a lot of people have fresh in their minds the anthrax vaccine, which did harm people. And so they remember that and are a little hesitant to get sort of mandated vaccines, but it also impacts operations. If you don't know how many people you're going to have to work with in a couple months, how are you going to plan things? And that is definitely a vulnerability. And to think that that vulnerability is a result of potential disinformation, or even, we didn't mention QAnon, but, there are, probably I don't want to say for sure, but probably service members who buy into to kind of differing viewpoints about things. And that really harms national security. If you don't know how many people you have to come to your defense, it's hard to defend. But that's excellent. Thank you so much for that. Can we do one more real quick? I'd love to hear another one, maybe from someone from not America, has some views.
So Marta, who is in Puerto Rico, Marta, is that correct?
Well, that's still technically America, but Puerto Rico works too.
So Marta just shared in the chat. Marta, would you like to expand on that?
Well, hi everyone, and thanks for the webinar. Very interesting, and it should be longer. Anyway, there's too many things to discuss here. We were from Poland and living in London. There was one member and another one from Germany, and me from Puerto Rico. And we discussed several things and from different viewpoints. And we discussed other impacts military could have by misinformation. And we talk about people not being able to use the internet to report urgencies, to shutting them out on social media. That means like a lot of TV channels in our country don't like what people speak out that I see happening in the region, and they shut them out, and then they don't have any way to report what's happening in the region. Mm-hmm. And so they don't get the help that is needed. And also, well, what he says there, I don't want to take too much time. There was another person that discussed that when you lose your devices with all the information in it, and if you are in the military, that is very dangerous, as well as if you are, not in the military. And all the things they get posted, and the reception misunderstand what is being posted, so that can create a crisis, and if no one understand what's happening. And that's about it. I'm sorry. We have so many things to discuss, and
I know.
I concentrated.
We'll have to make it a longer series then. But no, that's a great point as well, is when you have the opposite of having too much information is having too little information. And when something happens, everyone wants to know what's happening. And if you can't find out, you'll latch on to any information. And that's a great point. I saw it, on ships as well, because when you're on a ship at sea, not everyone has internet. Almost no one has internet. And so when you're thinking about information, a lot of times it's word of mouth. One person found something out and then it trickles down and you don't actually know if it's accurate. Tessa had a good one. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
When you have a military taking care of after a hurricane, for example,
yes.
And nobody has any connection, just digital connection is available, and just within the military stations and so forth, is very risky. So that's another example. That's something with a longer discussion.
For sure. Actually, that could be a whole other topic. I think that's a great example. And just briefly, also Tessa mentioned they discussed emotionalism and how that can result in frightening events due to misinformation. But emotionalism, absolutely, you have a lot of strong personalities in the military. You don't join the military, to sit in a corner and do nothing sometimes. Usually you have a strong conviction to do something, right? And when you have that, whether it's defend or offend, I guess, you have a lot of strong emotions that go along with that. And that can, that's a definite big part of media literacy, is checking those emotions. So with that, I'll continue to the second part of my presentations. Share my screen again, I hope. Yes. Close that. Okay, so there's our discussion question, and there we go. So 2021 military media literacy. So I was very excited when I started working on this presentation that actual changes had been made. Every year in the military, we have what's called general military training. And it's the exact same thing every year, a list of 12 online courses to take about, don't throw classified information in the trash, don't talk about things in public, just general things. Every year, most people are tired of it. But this year, when taking these courses, I was very excited to see that changes had been made, and we'll get to some of those changes. And that's DoD wide. All members of all branches of the military take these courses, as well as enhanced workplace awareness. And that's branch specific. So some branches, you'll see later, the Air Force has taken a more proactive role in digital and media literacy in the Air Force specifically. And so that's a little bit slower, but the overarching training is a little bit more widespread, which is great. The focus, though, is interesting too. Mostly a focus on hoaxes, whaling. If you've heard of phishing is kind of more small potatoes. Whaling is trying to get information about an organization. So you might phish one individual person, but your whaling aims might be, the entire military or all of the Air Force or the Army or something like that. And then social engineering as well. And so from the Intelligence Threat Handbook updates, we mentioned before those puzzle pieces, adversaries collect small pieces of information. When you combine them, they reveal a whole picture or a big picture. And that's the absolute danger here as well. So for cyber awareness, exploiting social and other media to share and rapidly spread false and misleading information about the US military and national security issues. And I was taking this training and I saw this and I was so excited because this was new information that was being spread Department of Defense wide. And this included disseminating fake news, propaganda, misleading headlines, and biased news, sharing fake video and audio, deep fakes. That's definitely something that folks have talked about, not necessarily at this level, but on a more, I guess, informational level of, people impersonating military personnel, but using deep fakes, which could look very convincing in the very near future, which is kind of scary. And gathering personal information, as we talked about, for social engineering attacks, whether to trick someone, for financial information, for operational information, all of that. And more in that training was the questions, which I think Tessa will be excited about, is most media messages intend to influence you, if only to attract traffic. So a lot of things are for advertisement, right? And there are many military blogs out there that are satire. And satire only works if you know it's satire. So like, how many times has a news organization picked up something from The Onion not knowing it's satire, right? So military folks love humor and satire, but not everyone reading that information might know it's satire as well. But so the questions that were in this training were: who provided the information and why? How does the information provider want you to act? And whose interest would your reaction serve? So not the 5 key questions, core concepts that the Center for Media Literacy has, but definitely a fantastic start, I think, to get people thinking about the why. And that thinking aspect, I think, is the most important. It's not just saying, hey, look out for fake news. They're saying, do that, but ask yourself, who created this information? Why did they create it? I would add to it, how does it make you feel? Even though we don't like to ask ourselves that in the military too much, but how does that information make you feel? Are you angry? Are you, outraged about something? Again, with January 6th as a good example, a lot of people there were very outraged based on information that they had received and discussed with others. So these questions I thought were an excellent start. And then for counterintelligence training, we mentioned, open social media information and posting. Open source information is probably the biggest source of information in general. I mean, from our side, if we were looking at terrorism or extremism, open source information is a huge and valuable resource. So newspapers, blogs, photos, you have maps, you have Google searches, social media, apps. Apps are huge, and apps are something that we've been trained about in the past years of, hey, I know no one likes to read terms and conditions, but what permissions are you granting your apps, especially as a military member? Is the location on all the time? Do they have access to all of your photos? And is it a calculator app? A calculator doesn't need access to your location and your photos, probably. And unsecured Wi-Fi, that we definitely have talked about in the past as well. That's not new necessarily, but unsecured Wi-Fi is just a huge, and for everyone, it's a huge security threat in general. So that's all Department of Defense training. And then they gave us a disinformation checklist, which was great. Again, research the source. So looking at who created the information, reading beyond the headline, beyond those clickbait headlines and things that make you want to click. Check info against known facts. That I think is a bit of a harder sell because people don't like to take the time to fact check. Consider the intent. We mentioned satire. Is it meant to be a joke? Is it meant to just entertain people, or is it meant to be actual information? And check personal bias, which I thought was a very bold thing to say, because I think they were very much trying to make sure it sounded balanced and make sure it was balanced. This idea of media literacy, because so many people have that notion that media literacy is just, a sanctioned list of good sources that the government trusts, and you can only read those sources. So checking personal bias, I thought was a great addition to that checklist, and I hope people pay attention. And from the Navy side, now going to more branch specific actions, I only really found this tweet from 2020 from the Chief of Information of the Navy, who said, social media literacy is national security too, which is definitely related to our topic. And they added a GIF because they're digitally literate and would like to show you that they know how to use social media. But yeah, definitely. I think we talked about operational security in general. You had loose lips sink ships as a catchy phrase in World War II. We still have that poster up in the halls of most military facilities, because it's still true. You know, if you're talking to someone outside, whether it's on social media, just in person, sharing information, social media is a big part of media literacy and digital literacy and operational security, and therefore also national security. So I didn't find too much other super topical media literacy initiatives from the Navy. I can look further. I think there's a lot in the works right now. And like I said, most things are very recent as of this year. So if we have the same conversation next year, it might be very different, and hopefully it gets better. But the Air Force, I would judge, just my own personal judgment. The Air Force has come out with digital literacy as a core competency. And so they have these core competencies. I don't know how many, but they've made digital literacy one of them. And this is new to 2021. And they define digital literacy so as a person who uses technology to identify, critically evaluate, and synthesize data and information, explore, create, and manage digital content, and appropriately interact in a virtual environment. And one of the colonels in the Air Force, Colonel Coggins, talks about our current national defense strategy, describes the need for the Department of Defense to modernize analytical and decision support processes to execute the national defense mission more effectively. This requires an increase in the digital literacy of our airmen, so codifying this skill as foundational competency makes sense. And I think that was probably the boldest statement connecting media literacy to national security and that national defense strategy. And I think that is a great sign of future things to come. So not just digital literacy, but media literacy. I mean, they really do go hand in hand, you know that. So I think that that was really heartening to see that, especially at that high of a level, to be implemented in the Air Force first. And they are smaller, so they're able to make quicker changes. The Army and the Navy are bigger, and it's a little bit harder to do that. But hopefully they will use the Air Force as a good example and continue. So that's what I have with that. But my second discussion question, and this is, I mean, we could talk for years about this, but what more could be done in the military now that you've heard kind of what's being done? What more could be done to increase media literacy effectively? So a lot of you are teachers, are trainers, are practitioners, and have given trainings on you know, what questions to ask yourself, whether it's the Center for Media Literacy's key questions or otherwise checking your biases, checking your emotions. Is that effective in your view? You know, just telling someone, giving someone a checklist on what to look for, is that effective? What more could be done? Especially knowing now the gravity of the situation, how much it can impact national security. So that's my discussion question, is what more could be done? And I look forward to hearing some good discussion. So if we could get into those breakout rooms again, that would be great.
Yep, I'm going to remix this all and open the breakout rooms now. I've put the discussion prompt in the chat here, and I'll also put it into a broadcast once we're in the room. So I guess we'll do this for about 7 to 10 minutes,
Okay.
and I will give you a another 2-minute warning.
Thank you.
And if you're still here, Nancy and Rita and Renee and Dylan, if you need help getting into a breakout room, just give me a shout or put something in the chat there. And of course, if you'd like to just hang out here, that's totally fine as well.
Oh goodness, what a great discussion. I hope you all had good discussions too. Just to touch very briefly on our group, we had a representative from Israel as well as India, which was super fascinating, and talking about why disinformation is spread. And I'm sure you've had previous discussions on that. Is it to get money from clicks, or is it to sow chaos within the ranks of the military? That's two different targets, two different goals in mind, and the psychology behind why people accept disinformation versus also spread disinformation is incredibly interesting and valuable. And from the Israeli perspective, we've talked about starting media literacy, the kind of military bent in high school, because military service in Israel is compulsory and they serve right after high school. So having that like kind of pre-media literacy before joining the military was an interesting thing that would be great to see implemented as well. But I'd love to hear from other groups. Michelle, yes, you're right in front of me. Go ahead.
We had such an interesting, diverse group. And I'm going to just briefly go over some of the things we talked about. Chloe from Colorado talked about how making the media literacy, raising the level of media literacy of the military has to be proactive, which means beginning that training when they're not yet in the military, when they're children.
Mm-hmm.
So starting with the basis of improving media literacy education overall. And then my thoughts on that, once they're in the military, I was really interested in what you're saying about the Air Force is doing this and the Navy's doing that. I think what would be helpful is to do research on best practices and standardize something throughout the military so that we're not doing catch as catch can. We really know what works and we're implementing that. And then Katya from Costa Rica, she was so interesting because Costa Rica disbanded their military in 1948 and put all of the money into education.
Oh, wow.
So she comes from a country where there is no military. She was in Florida for a while, but that, but she comes from a different perspective, but she kind of added on to what I said about best practices, then training the leadership in the military first and then going down the ranks. And then we spoke to Ana Maria. Sorry for my enthusiasm. Latin America is my region of interest. Ana Maria comes from Colombia, where there's a very complex situation with the military. There is a lot of corruption. They've been involved in violent crime. They may be the ones who want to spread false information. So unfortunately, we just got to her at the very end, but I really loved the group that coming from all these diverse ideas of what the military means.
That absolutely, that's such a great point. And coming at it from a U.S. perspective, even just looking at U.S. actions over time. I mean, not to say whatever we did in the past was wrong, but interesting things have happened in the last 200 years that we've had a military, and spreading information for strategic purposes has been something every military does. Dropping pamphlets, misleading people to do something. So absolutely. Right. Someone else, who else would like to go? Otherwise we'll have to pick someone.
I'll go. I was with Nino, and we talked about something similar to what Michelle's group talked about, basically standardizing. That I'm prior Air Force, so of course I'm very proud of what the Air Force has done, but why should it have to be something separate? And part of our conversation was people have different ways of doing things, and they want to see it sort of with their perspective. And I said, that's why you have a steering committee. That's why you have representatives to say, sign off on this, because we have the experts. And instead of tying up numerous experts coming up with all these different programs, you have them all together and you have the center of excellence, so to speak. And you say, from here, everyone does the same thing and we're all on the same page. And it's part of your evaluation, because like the Air Force made that now it's escaping me at the moment, a core competency you're going to be evaluated on that. So that's how it really comes home.
No, and that's a great point too. And I was thinking about that. How do you measure the impact of this training? If someone, is just clicking through slides and checks a box, is that impactful? But that evaluation component, I think, will be, the Air Force might be a great testing ground for future branches to implement. I think they should. Why not? Absolutely. Excellent point. Thank you. Who else?
Hello, everyone. I think then I will just add on previous what was said. I'm Rita Zendago from Riga, from NATO Stratcom Center, and I just wanted, and we just discussed with my conversation partner. It was Kelly, who is here somewhere. I don't see her currently, but we discussed this training issue. That if you repeat it every year, it becomes very boring. You become very sick and tired. But as I mentioned, the fact that this field is so actively developing media, I mean, all these disinformation, misinformation factors. So that would be a mistake by the trainer to repeat the same stuff every year. Actually, there is so much new every half a year, then it's also a kind of a task of the trainer to develop the instruction, the course, and make it interesting to the audience every time. And then it would be interesting, and then the staff would be interested to follow it.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, I mean, with a lot of I talked about the boringness of a lot of our general military training, is it takes money. It takes money to make changes. And the fact that they allocated funding to make those changes this year was such a great and wonderful surprise. But you're absolutely right. And I wish it was also more at the ground level, like getting people together in a circle and having these discussions and having the talking points could keep things fresh every year. Bringing in examples of disinformation or media that you consumed and weren't sure about, or you did fact checking on or something, and just making it very personal, because it is very personal. The target in all of this is the human mind. It's not, we talk about at the Center of Excellence, a lot of times the point that we make over and over and over and over again is that it's not a tech problem, it's a people problem. And people want some sort of app or software that will, keep everyone from looking at disinformation, or will filter out fake news, and that'll be that. But that doesn't, I mean, that's great, but that doesn't really solve the problem. The problem is the thinking and the psychology of why we believe certain things. So that's an excellent point. Thank you. Anyone else? I know we could go for hours, but do we have time for one more?
Yeah, final thought. We're actually at time here, just a bit over. So yeah, maybe a final thought or two would be great.
Great. Who would? I don't know. Tessa, do you have any thoughts from your group to share?
Tessa, you're muted.
Sorry. I was with a woman named Christine, and I believe she was also from the US. And we were talking about, well, what could be done to better things. And one of the encouraging comments that was in the captain's remarks that you quoted from the Air Force, Monika, was that he mentions that it was a foundational competency. And I love the word foundational, because so often media literacy is perceived to be a Band-Aid, or, a vaccination against misinformation or disinformation. And I think all of us who are experienced practitioners, we know better. It goes well beyond any kind of Band-Aid. It really I like to say it's the mindset that goes with the headset because it really is the mindset. And when you have foundational media literacy, then you really can see how media literacy is applied in almost every situation and media texts that you come across. So it's very interesting how when you have the right ingredients in the training and you have the reinforcement and you have practice with people and the discussions you were talking about, Monica, those I think are essential. Then you can really start to see what media literacy is and how it works. And that's really, in a sense, what we talk about when we say citizens are the first line of defense.
Right.
If they're prepared, they are.
Mhm. And this was such a great point. I know we talked kind of outside of the discussion about this, where you were met with some pushback about media literacy being in the military because you have a lot of people, everyone, you want everyone to follow orders and you don't want them necessarily to question those orders. So the idea of introducing the concept of questioning information could
Right.
scare a lot of leadership. And I hope that people would know better that that's not what that would be about, and that having critical thinking skills makes better soldiers, sailors, airmen, etc.
Right.
So having those discussions might be a key part of getting this to be more prevalent and foundational in any military. Because they're not questioning you, they are questioning outside information to keep everything safe and operational. So, Iglika has some resources in the chat too that look, interesting. Negative impact of deepfakes. Yes, for sure. And deepfakes, that's something that, one, it's interesting to talk about. It's kind of a juicy topic. And also something that is really of concern for not just the military, but the NATO Center of Excellence in Riga too has a lot of information about deepfakes as well. And also just, you should check out their website. They have a lot of great publications from all over the world on similar topics. But yeah, we'll see what the future holds. Stuff changes constantly. And, it could be a month from now when there's a whole new threat and they'll have to do a whole new batch of trainings and we'll have to see where that goes. But media literacy really is at the foundation of almost any type of media consumption or information consumption. So that's kind of my takeaway for that. But with that, I guess, Sam, I'll wrap it up. But thank you very much for everyone's thoughts and lively discussion. And make sure again to tune into Michelle's lecture. I want to say in 2 weeks. When well, Sam, you can fill in on that, but that'll really tie these three conversations together in a great way. So I'm looking forward to that. So thank you again. Sam, I'll let you have the final word.
Monica, thank you so much. I learned so much today. And even though we've talked before this about what we've learned today, I still learned so much more. So thank you so much. Tessa, thank you for putting this together. And yes, please don't forget to join us in another 2 weeks on, oh my goodness, what is the date? November 29th. And Michelle, who's here with us today, Michelle Johnson, will be talking about this in the context of public diplomacy. And I can't wait to learn what sharp power is. So if you're like me and you are so curious about what is sharp power and what does media literacy have to do with it, please join us on the 29th. And in the meantime, stay safe. And thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Bye. All right, take care. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam.
Well, thank you. That was fascinating. So
Yeah, I don't know if Monica's still on. I hope she is, but I thought it was really interesting.